How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another trade recap. So today we're going to be going over a trade that I took on Apple. It's Wednesday, September 28th. Apple had a bad news catalyst and it had a technical pattern on the daily chart that I really like. I took it for a 2-minute downside opening range break off the open, rode the momentum to the downside, and made $1,840. Ended up being a nice green day, and you'll see when I go over the trade that I held this for a little bit longer than I normally do, almost 6 minutes, which I know is still very short term, but I'm normally in trades for anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes. The reason that I held this a little bit longer is because of the daily breakdown, and it's Apple. It's not as volatile. I know that this thing, even if it bounces a little bit, it's not going to have those huge bounces like Tesla or some of the other more volatile names. So I held it for a decent amount of time. And then when it found some support and it started to bounce, I just took the full position off for a nice trade. And then something I want to highlight because it's really crazy. This week, a lot of the patterns that I talk about in this day trading options guide have played out, and especially the one today. So this is a 62-page downloadable PDF where I go through my entire process and all the years of work that I've put in to figure out how to become a consistently profitable trader. This is the main page, and then this is the table of contents. This is everything that I go through. I cover a lot, all questions that I've received over the years of putting my journey on social media. I make sure to answer in this guide. And then the most important part is I make sure to go over my favorite daily chart patterns, the favorite intraday patterns, the technical levels that I like to trade around. And then as you go through the guide, the really cool thing is I have it in written form, but then I also add YouTube videos that go over that specific topic in further detail. And I also have more examples. So it's really in depth and a great way to learn exactly my process and how I approach the market each and every day. If you're interested in getting access to this, there's going to be a link in the description below. So now let's go over the overall market SPY. I look at the SPY and the Qs, but in all reality, I really just need SPY to get an idea of what things are doing. So this day on the 21st, this was a pretty nasty sell-off day. Overall market has been in a downtrend. It's very weak. It is extended to the downside, a lot of red days in the row, but every single time it tries to bounce, I feel like sellers just take control. So as far as the overall sentiment, it's very weak and there's a lot of fear. So that's very important to understand what the market is doing and kind of what the sentiment is. So that way it can be applied to stocks, and especially today, Apple, when it had bad news. So now taking a step back after analyzing the market, looking at SPY, it's very beat up. It's extremely weak. There's a lot of negative news out there. There's a lot of fear. So let's look at Apple. Apple was forming a bit of a bear flag on the daily. It was below the 9 EMA. That's a short-term indicator that I really like to look at. Anytime we're trending below the 9 EMA, I'm going to think bearish. And if we're trending above it, I'm going to try to focus to the upside. I'm going to try to be bullish. So it had negative news that the iPhone demand is not as exciting as they thought, and then they're going to pull back on production of the iPhone. That's not good, and that's going to be bad for the overall market. So it was showing a ton of weakness in the pre-market, realizing that the daily chart pattern was a bear flag. This 150 to 149 was major support. It broke that. The path of least resistance was going to be to the downside. Now, just because it broke that support and looked really good to the downside, it doesn't have to go lower. So that's why I'm always going to wait for a technical pattern, and then I'm going to watch price action and try to trade around those levels. But ultimately, the technical patterns are going to be the most important thing off the open. And you can see the executions of the trade at the bottom of the screen right now. So ended up taking the short at 9:32 and 38 seconds. I took the 148 puts. I happened to have those preloaded in my order entry. They ended up being slightly in the money by the time I take them. Normally, I try to take at the money or next strike out of the money. But the only downside with options is that if I have something preloaded and the setup looks good, I don't have time to switch, so I just have to take what's in there. So I ended up doing the 148 puts, got them at $2.88, held it for 6 minutes, a little bit longer than I normally do because this isn't Tesla, it's much less volatile. And when it broke down, the selling pressure was very aggressive and ended up getting out at 9:38 and 3 seconds and sold all of those contracts at $3.80 for a nice win. Now let's break down the intraday. So these are 2-minute candles. This is the time frame that I really like to trade on. So what happened off the open? Knowing that Apple gapped down, the first move was up into the gap, but realizing that there is going to be selling pressure as it moves higher. So I don't want to short just because I'm going to wait for a technical pattern. The first 2-minute candle closed green, which is good. That's what I like when a stock is gapping down. I want that first move to be up, to be green. So if anybody bought early off the open, look at this next candle. Immediately engulfs it. So they're going to be underwater, and that could possibly start a momentum move to the downside. So as this got below the 9 EMA and the VWAP, started to show some weakness. I ended up anticipating the 2-minute downside opening range break. I got short right at this green arrow, ended up breaking down, showing a lot of weakness, had a little bit of a bounce at 146, but then very quickly, sellers took back control and ended up holding it to right around 155.50, started to bounce off that. That's a little bit longer than I normally hold trades for. So in this bounce, I ended up just getting rid of the position for a very nice trade. And this was a textbook 2-minute downside opening range break, one of a few patterns that I really like to trade, and I make sure to highlight this in detail in my day trading options guide. And after this trade, I called it because when I can hit the open pretty quick and I'm nicely green, I don't want to do what a lot of people do and what I used to do in the beginning of my trading career, which is continue to trade and give those gains back. So I called it a day. So that was a trade recap. I appreciate you watching the video. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I just want to talk about a couple cool things that I have to offer. The first is going to be my newsletter watch list. This is exactly what I post on my private Twitter 30 minutes before market open every single day. I do a quick analysis of the overall market, the SPY and the Qs, if there's any major market news that day, and then all the stocks I'm interested in watching, it's usually 4 or 5, if there's any major news tied to them, and all the levels that I think are in play. To the left, this is exactly what I'm posting on my private Twitter. I make sure to add that newsletter. I take a screenshot of the charts, green line to the upside being long, red line to the downside being short, and I make sure to highlight those 2 levels above. This is everything that's going on in my mind and my game plan going into each market open. Also, I make sure to add a little mental note because every day is slightly different, and here's an example of that. And if you want something that's a little bit less of a commitment, I do offer a live one-on-one call for 1 hour. This is where you can ask me questions about my journey, go over setups specifically, everything that I've gone through as a trader. Whether you're beginner or advanced, this is a great way to connect with me. So if you're interested in my private Twitter or the one-on-one live call, feel free to go to callmattdiamond.com or check out the links in the description below.